Everyone's talking about who will be the next superpower, but they're all wrong. There won't be any more superpowers, and this is why. Let's be clear, the conditions that created superpowers, the unique circumstances of the 19th and 20th centuries, don't exist anymore. The game has fundamentally changed. You can think of superpower status like a scorecard, because superpower status isn't one thing, it is 6 things all at once: military reach, economic scale, energy independence, strategic geography, technological dominance, alliances. Each is important in its own right, but the catch is that any country aspiring to global dominance must excel in all categories simultaneously, and that is far harder than it sounds. And it's why every major contender, China, India, and even the EU, inevitably falls short. And at the end, we'll put every contender back on the scorecard so you can see exactly where each one falls. Superpower doesn't just mean powerful or influential. France is influential. Saudi Arabia is powerful. Neither is a superpower. A superpower embodies dominance across multiple dimensions of influence simultaneously: military, economic, technological, geographic, all of it all at once with global reach. The British Empire came close, but it lacked certain industrial capacities and faced constant imperial overstretch. The Soviet Union had massive military might, but its economy was brittle, ultimately shattering under its own weight. The United States after 1991? Well, that was something different. That was truly a unipolar moment. A superpower with the world's largest economy, best technology and reserve currency, most protected geography, and the densest alliance networks. It was everything everywhere, all working together all at once. You can think of the concept of becoming a global superpower like a strategy video game where you're designing the perfect empire. You have to have a high score in all of the following areas. The first is military reach, and no, that doesn't mean that you just need a strong army with plenty of tanks to overrun your closest enemy. You need to be able to project your power far beyond the oceanic horizons. That means building a blue water navy that can operate anywhere with impunity. So you'll need overseas bases on multiple continents, and you'll need the ability to not just fight, but win wars thousands of miles from home. Military reach is the clearest indicator, but it is completely contingent on category number 2, economic scale. GDP matters, sure, but you also need a massive domestic marketplace that other nations depend on accessing. You need a currency that everyone uses and the economic leverage to reward friends and punish enemies, wherever they might live. Your economy runs on energy, the third category. If someone can turn off your lights, you are not a superpower. You either need vast domestic resources or completely secure supply chains that can't be disrupted. And today, that is becoming harder than ever. It helps if you've got some natural defenses, which fit nicely into our fourth category, which we'll call strategic geography. Natural defenses make invading you nearly impossible. Things like oceans, mountains, and friendly neighbors. It helps if you can lock down on choke points, shipping straits, financial systems, internet infrastructure, and tech supply chains. Which leads to our fifth category, technological dominance. You need near monopolistic control over critical technologies that other countries depend on and cannot easily replicate. Being really good at making slightly better smartphones every year doesn't count. We're talking about the kind of tech stranglehold where everyone else is basically renting their future from you. Lastly, you need a network of reliable partners who amplify your power rather than drain it. This is known as alliance architecture. Prospective partners must be willing to follow your lead in crises, host your military bases, and adopt or at least tolerate your cultural standards. There's other categories to consider, of course. It's said that population drives geopolitics. In other words, it helps if you've got a stable birth rate and favorable demographic trends. Diplomatic influence matters, your history matters, cultural influence matters. All these fall under relatively subjective categories of soft power that are difficult to empirically pin down. But on the whole, if you were building the ideal superpower from scratch, you would probably create something along these lines. A massive country with protective oceans on both sides, hundreds of millions of people, energy resources for centuries, the world's financial center, technology monopolies others cannot break, military bases on every continent, and allies who actually show up when you need them. This was achievable in 1945, when the US emerged from World War II with 50% of global GDP, untouched infrastructure, and a nuclear monopoly. In 2026, that is a whole different story. The rules that built superpowers don't work anymore. 3 fundamental shifts have made the past century's superpower model obsolete. We'll start with reason number 1. War no longer pays. For most of human history, conquest was profitable. Rome expanded and gained productive provinces. Britain built an empire that generated enormous resource wealth through trade and extraction. Even America's continental expansion added valuable territory and opportunity. Today, the economics have reversed. Modern warfare is economically destructive. Look at Russia's invasion of Ukraine. As of late 2024, estimates suggest Russia has spent well over $200 billion on the war, while suffering hundreds of thousands of casualties. To gain what? Devastated territories with destroyed infrastructure, international sanctions, and pariah status that cost the economy an estimated $1.3 trillion through 2026. A military that has burned through decades of Soviet-era stockpiles. The West hasn't had it much better. Even supposedly successful modern wars rarely break even. Brown University researchers estimate that the 20-year global wars on terror cost the U.S. somewhere in the region of $8 trillion. In Iraq, the supposed prize, Iraqi oil, never materialized as a benefit that came close to offsetting costs. There and elsewhere, despite tactical and technological superiority, political decision-making and strategic withdrawal created massive power vacuums. The broader region is just as unstable as ever. So why doesn't war pay anymore? Modern wealth comes from complex supply chains, educated workers, and advanced technology, all the things that bombs destroy rather than capture. You can seize a semiconductor factory, but without engineers, suppliers, and customers, it is just an incredibly expensive paperweight. And then there's the nuclear problem. Great power wars between nuclear states risk civilization-ending escalation. The Cuban Missile Crisis taught us that the closer two superpowers get to direct conflict, the closer we all get to annihilation. And that puts a hard ceiling on just how much conquest is even possible. Guerrilla warfare and modern insurgencies make occupations nightmarishly expensive. Britain grappled with this as its empire dissolved. The US learned this the hard way in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Russia previously learned it in Afghanistan and is relearning its lesson in Ukraine. You can't just bomb your way to superpower status anymore. In a minute, we'll see why China understands this lesson better than anyone and why it shapes their entire strategic outlook. But let's discuss reason number 2. Economic dominance creates its own wave of opposition. It's a paradoxical pattern. The more economically dominant you become, the harder everyone works to reduce their dependence on you. But historically, that is just the way the cookies crumbled. When Britain dominated global trade in the 1800s, its rising wealth didn't just buy influence, it woke up competitors like Germany, Japan, and the US. Each one started building an industrial base designed to break Britain's grip. British economic hegemony created the very rivals who would challenge it. That same pattern plays out today, albeit far faster. China's Belt and Road Initiative initially looked brilliant. They were eager to loan money to developing countries in exchange for infrastructure agreements, influence, and economic dependence. By 2023, China had invested $1 trillion across more than 150 countries. The result, as we have seen, has been a form of transparent backlash that wouldn't have been possible 100 years ago. Countries from Sri Lanka to Zambia, struggling and saddled with debt, accused China of debt trap diplomacy. Maybe both sides should have seen this coming, but rather than creating loyal partners, China instead created resentful ones actively looking for alternatives. Sri Lanka's Hambantota port, leased to China for 99 years after the country couldn't repay its loans, became a global symbol of predatory lending. US dollar dominance has spawned its own opposition. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, have spent years discussing alternatives to dollar-based trade. After the US froze Russian central bank assets in 2022, even America's allies began to quietly diversify their reserves, worried they could be next. China accelerated its development of digital yuan specifically to reduce dollar dependence. Economic coercion teaches countries to diversify, not submit. Economic power is now self-limiting. You get too dominant and you teach everyone to start working around you. And now it's time for reason number 3. Technology can't be monopolized anymore, and that is a seismic shift in gaining superpower status. Britain monopolized Industrial Revolution technology for decades, helping secure its own dominance. The US dominated computing, aerospace, and nuclear technology for a generation after World War II. These monopolies translated directly into superpower status. That is impossible now. Information moves in an instant. What once took years to learn through espionage now appears in academic papers, patent filings, and hacked databases within months, if not weeks. Reverse engineering used to take decades in the 1950s. Today, it can happen in less than a year. Part of the problem is that talent is globally mobile. Chinese students earn PhDs at MIT and Stanford and Harvard and Yale. Indian engineers work in Silicon Valley, and then they return home taking the knowledge with them. In 2023, China produced 3.6 million STEM graduates annually, compared to America's 820,000. You can't maintain a knowledge monopoly when the people who create that knowledge move so freely between borders. Cyber espionage and offshore manufacturing have obliterated technology monopolies. China's alleged theft of the F-35 designs reportedly accelerated their J-20 stealth fighter by years. When Apple offshored iPhone production, Foxconn, a multinational electronics manufacturer based in Taiwan, learned how to master the entire manufacturing process, not just assembly. The pattern repeats itself everywhere. Smartphones, invented in the US in 2007, now see their market share completely dominated by Chinese companies. In the AI realm, China is leading in research and talent, publishing more papers on the subject than in the US. More than 80% of all solar panels shipped around the globe, themselves invented in the US-based Bell Labs in 1954, are now made by China. The knowledge diffusion rate has accelerated catastrophically for would-be monopolists. Technologies that used to take 50 years to spread globally in 1950 now spread in less than 5. You can't stay ahead enough to leverage temporary advantages into permanent dominance. This is the new reality. War doesn't pay, economic dominance creates opposition, and technology can't be monopolized. These three shifts have fundamentally changed what's possible. Now, let's see what that means for the countries that everyone thinks will be superpowers one day. And we can test the scorecard on the obvious candidate. If anyone looks like the next superpower, it's China, second largest economy at roughly 18 trillion GDP, a modernizing military that's added aircraft carriers, stealth fighters, and hypersonic missiles, leading in 5G technology, electric vehicles, and solar manufacturing, a population of 1.4 billion. That should work, right? And it would, until you see what China depends on to keep the lights on. China imports approximately 70% of its oil and 45% of its natural gas. The killer headache is that most of that energy arrives via ship through the Straits of Malacca, a narrow waterway between Malaysia and Indonesia. It is a crucial choke point, and it is controlled by US-aligned powers. And that means China's entire economy, all of that manufacturing, all those mega cities, all that military, runs on energy that passes through a strait the US Navy could slam shut in an afternoon. During a Taiwan crisis scenario, this becomes America's ace in the hole. China knows this, which is why they're actively exploring building overland pipelines from Russia and Kazakhstan. But even those can't replace seaborne oil, not even close. Geography compounds the problem. China is surrounded by rivals and potential rivals. India, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, all are either allied with the US or balancing against Chinese power. Russia is a partner of convenience, not a reliable ally in any sense. They all compete in Central Asia, and Russia fears long-term Chinese expansion into Siberia. And like we said before, China's Belt and Road Initiative created resentment, not loyal allies. Then there is the demographics. China's population peaked and is now in decline. The UN projects their population will now plummet from 1.4 billion to half of its current number at less than 800 million by 2100. Their workforce is shrinking right now. Fewer workers, more retirees, rising costs. It is the opposite of a superpower trajectory. Looking at the 6 superpower qualifiers, here is China's verdict. A formidable regional power, just not a global superpower. And if China can't clear that bar, the next candidate is even tougher. India has in spades what China is rapidly losing: young people. And in a second, we'll show you why the advantage is real, but also why it still doesn't add up to superpower status. With around 1.5 billion people and a median age of almost 29, they have got the workforce China desperately needs. They are pretty democratic, making Western alliances easier to build. Their geography is defensible enough, with mountains to the north and oceans to the south. India's problems rest with, well, everything else. Its economy? India's GDP is approximately $4.1 trillion, about a fifth of China's and a seventh of America's. Per capita income remains around $2,600, meaning limited domestic consumption power. Infrastructure lags decades behind, power outages are common, roads are inadequate, and ports are run inefficiently. The middle-income trap looms large. Militarily, it's actually pretty strong, regionally at least, but it has absolutely zero global reach. India's navy is coastal defense embodied, not blue water power projection. They can't sustain expeditionary operations beyond South Asia, and they haven't since they were part of the British Empire during World War II. And when was the last time you heard about an Indian military base in Africa, Europe, or Latin America? Never. They don't exist. Technology? India excels at IT services, call centers, software development, and back-office operations. Yes, your computer has supposedly been compromised and you need to buy gift cards immediately. But cutting-edge innovation, manufacturing dominance, far from it. At least not yet. They still import most military hardware, being problematically dependent on Russia while also broadly aligned with the West. As for energy, it's a similar situation to China. India imports about 85% of its oil, most of that from Russia. Like China, they're vulnerable to the same Indian Ocean choke points. Block the Strait of Hormuz, where much of the Middle East's crude has to pass through, and India's economy grinds to a halt. It might sound like 1 billion people should equal automatic power, except population size alone hasn't mattered since industrialization made productivity more important than raw numbers. So what's India's verdict? Important regional player, but far too many missing pieces for superpower status. Now let's look at one contender that doesn't fail on money. On paper, the European Union, or EU, looks like an incredible candidate for the next global superpower, assuming you believe a bloc of like-minded states can function like one. It's got a combined GDP of almost $20 trillion, rivaling the US. It's got a respectable population of 450 million. It is strong in aerospace, automotive, and luxury goods. And the main point is that it's got integrated alliance architecture. It is literally a union of states. And here's why the EU looks like a superpower on paper, but still fails the test in real life. The moment you need them to act like one country, they can't. It's the committee problem embodied. Militarily, the EU has no unified command. France has nuclear weapons and wants strategic autonomy. Germany spent decades underfunding its military. Its defense budget sat around 1.5% of GDP until Russia invaded Ukraine and shocked them into action. Western European members want trade with Russia. These aren't complementary positions. The EU depends almost entirely on the US for power projection and the nuclear umbrella. When crises emerge, Libya, Syria, and Ukraine, just to name a few, Europe tends to wait for America to lead. 27 different militaries don't equal one strong one. They equal a committee that can't agree on deployment priorities. The Russia-Ukraine war also has exposed catastrophic vulnerabilities in energy independence. Germany had made itself dependent on Russian gas. Nord Stream pipelines pushed roughly 55% of German gas imports before the war. When the supply was cut off, energy prices spiked across Europe, forcing countries into emergency measures. The renewable transition is incomplete and uncoordinated across member states. But the fatal flaw is political unity. Hungary blocks consensus to maintain ties to Russia. France and Germany disagree on fiscal policy, nuclear power, and defense spending. Italy's government changes constantly. You just can't be a superpower if you can't agree on foreign policy. And worse still, Brexit proved the whole edifice is reversible. If Britain could just leave, the union isn't permanent. Europe's verdict? Economic bloc and regulatory power in spades, but far from a unified superpower. Let's take a second to dismiss some other candidates. First, the bear in the room. Russia's economy is smaller than Italy's, $2.2 trillion in GDP. Its demographics are in a free fall. Its population is declining. Life expectancy for men is around 68 years, actually lower than standouts like Syria, Palestine, Venezuela, and North Korea. The Ukraine war revealed military weaknesses, rampant corruption, poor logistics, and outdated equipment. They are a regional power with nukes. Nothing more, nothing less. Brazil, Indonesia, and Nigeria might be emerging powers, but each is missing multiple critical elements. Brazil has resources but lacks infrastructure, technology, and military reach. Indonesia has population numbers, but minimal global economic or military presence. Nigeria has demographics but unstable governance and infrastructure deficits. Demographics alone don't make you a superpower. If they did, we'd probably be worried about Bangladesh taking over the world. Let's look at our scorecard one last time. China fails energy independence, strategic geography, and alliances. India fails on economic scale, military reach, technology, and energy independence. The EU fails on military reach, energy independence, geography, and, most critically, political unity. Russia isn't even a real consideration, but even if it was, it still fails in economy, demographics, and technology. Every single contender fails in multiple categories. Notice a pattern? So what replaces superpowers in the New World Order? Regional powers, with China in East Asia, India and South Asia, and the US in the Americas? Domain-specific dominance, with the US leading in tech and finance, China in manufacturing and the EU setting regulatory standards that everyone follows? In the past, superpowers controlled everything. It looks increasingly likely that future powers will merely control something. The world looks like it will indeed eventually become multipolar, becoming somewhat more stable through mutual dependence. But who organizes collective action during the inevitable crisis? Globalization has made us too interconnected for dominance, and you can't control a system you depend on. The 20th century created the conditions for superpowers, with world wars, technological monopolies, and colonial legacies. The 21st century has different rules. Superpowers are really of the last century, and ultimately the US might be the last one we ever see. Now go check out The End of the United States Superpower Empire starts here, or click on this video instead.